Hi, guys, and welcome to Kirsty's Corner, the podcast where hearing about my life will probably make you feel better about your own. This episode's going to be called My Strip Club Granny. I was thinking about this because watching Joe Biden at the debate last week made me think about my 92-year-old grandmother, God bless her. She passed away a while ago. She suffered from dementia and Alzheimer's, and she was really full of life. Watching Joe Biden, it appears as though he might be suffering the same thing. And when I saw how frail he was, and it seems at night he doesn't do as well as during the day. And that's what happened with my grandmother. But when I was 18, I'm going to tell you, her and her sister in law and her daughter took me to a male strip club for my 18th birthday. Not exactly something that you expect your 90-year-old grandmother to do or her 70 something year old daughter, but it was really interesting. And all the women were clapping and dancing. And what happens when you get a few old ladies that go, you know, flirting and dancing with these young guys that were in their 20s. Couldn't have been any more than 30, that's for sure. So, my Aunt Rose, she was a spitfire. That woman was so funny. And she jumped up on that stage and she started wiggling her butt and shaking her breasts and rubbing her hands all over this really young guy. And he was just smiling and laughing, and she started putting coins down his G-string. And she was laughing and she says, "Sorry, Sonny, but my Social Security check didn't get here yet this month, so that's all I got is quarters." I was so embarrassed. I yelled at my grandmother and said, "How could you let her do that? Here, I'll give her dollars. That's terrible." And my grandmother looked at me and said, "You remember what we're teaching you right now, because that 90-year-old woman is going to get the pants off of a 30-year-old guy. Watch, the more she coins she puts in his G string, the lower that's going to get to the floor." And that guy, he just kept gyrating his hips and he didn't realize that everything was swinging left and right and all around, and she was clapping and all happy and excited, and all the rest of the women in the crowd, they realized what was happening and they were happy and excited. And it's one of those really good memories of two people from my past that have been gone a long time. And my grandmother was so funny. My brother and I used to try to find our biggest possible friends. We'd go find these 300-pound guys and bring them back to my family's Christmas parties. Because my grandmother she would start her night. This woman looked kind of old and frail. She would start her night with 16-ounce glass that she called a highball. And she would tell you half whiskey, half water. But each glass that she got refilled, it was a little less water. So by the third or fourth drink, she was drinking 16 ounces of straight whiskey. And that woman, she could outdrink anybody. She didn't even do it to try to keep up with anybody. But me and my brother, we would invite our friends, and we wouldn't tell our grandmother that we were betting that our grandmother would outdrink all these big guys that we would bring over. And it would be so funny because I didn't tell her. I just would, every time she asked for a drink, I poured the same exact drink for whoever we brought over. And, there was this one guy I'll never forget. My grandmother got up, she waved to everybody, and she says, "Good night, everybody. I'll see you in a few days. Everybody be safe. Merry Christmas." And she just walked out the front door and she drove herself home. And this guy's name was Tommy. And Tommy wound up crawling under the kitchen table, spent the night there, crawled into the bathroom, you know, couldn't keep anything down for a while. And in the morning, he crawled back under the table in the dark, and he was like, "Please just leave me here. I feel like I'm gonna die." And all he kept saying to me every time I talked to him after that was, "How did that old lady do that? How did that old lady get up and just walk out the door?" But she was funny, and she was always a partier, and she was German, and she was really proud of being German. And she would get up and she'd sing these songs. Sicka sacka, hoy, 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 the kleinen Mädchen sind so treu. And she would go on and on and on. And she would make the best cakes, the best pastries. And God forbid if you told her that you liked something, you got it till the day she died. I kid you not. There was one time as she got older and she got the dementia and she got the Alzheimer's. She told my mother that she had a headache. So my mom says, "Well, I'll go get you some Tylenol or ibuprofen." She brings it over to her. My grandmother reads the bottle. My grandmother looks at her and says, "Betty, what's the matter with you? You know I can't take this." My mother was shocked. She's like, "Why can't you take this?" My grandmother says, "On the back of the bottle, it says you can't take any alcohol. I gotta have my highball. Gotta have my highball every day. I can't take Tylenol. It says it on the bottle." She actually didn't want to take her Alzheimer's medication, the Ariset, because of the alcohol. But I swear she didn't have an alcohol problem. It sounds like she did, but she didn't. I used to joke with her and tell her if she ever sliced her wrist that whiskey would just come shooting out. I think it was her 80th birthday party. All her and her friends they were all drinking and all jumping up and down doing the Charleston and doing all these dances, the jitterbug and stuff from like the 1940s and 30s and stuff. And it was just amazing to see all these old people up and about. And my mother was Italian. That was my father was German, so that was my father's German mother. And my mother's Italian. And my mother said she didn't want to be buried with my father and his whole German family because she couldn't speak any German, and that she didn't want to be stuck in a cemetery with a bunch of people that were doing nothing but singing, drinking songs in a different language and getting drunk because my mother didn't drink either. My grandmother was interesting though. She always got things wrong. She didn't call them tampons, they were tampoons. It wasn't a gynecologist, it was a groinecologist. I couldn't make this stuff up if I tried. One time, we had a lot of women in our family, a lot of girls, and one of my sisters went to my grandmother and asked her for a sanitary napkin. And my grandmother was already old. Of course, she didn't use them, so I don't know what the hell my sister was thinking, but my grandmother comes out of the bathroom with a rag and says, "Here, this is what we used in my day. Stick it in your underwear, you'll be fine." Watching the debate, I really felt like having him up on stage was elder abuse. And I saw a very vibrant, lively woman that used to get up, and she had a kazoo, and she used to get up at these parties and she'd play her kazoo, and she would sing Just a Gigolo, and she'd do all kinds of dances. She loved getting dressed up in costumes and stuff. She was pretty wild. It was funny because, I'm large breasted, and everybody in the family was jealous because I got all of my grandmother's breasts. She used to tell me, "Hey, work it if you got, shake and shimmy, baby. Shake and shimmy." Some of my cousins, they were upset. They were like, I told them, "I got enough to spread around. I have no problem with that. I need to get them reduced." But my father had died when I was 3. And one thing I can say, my mother, she allowed my grandmother to stay in contact with us. And she never, after my father died, I was only 3 years old. So she could have just cut my father's mother out of our lives completely, and she didn't. My grandmother stayed in our lives, and she was a good grandmother. Told her once that I loved German chocolate cake, and she made it for me for every birthday, every Christmas, every graduation, whatever. I got German chocolate cake. If you told her you liked bean and ham soup, she made that too. And some of the stuff she made, I really wish that I knew how to make it. Every once in a while, you know how like every once in a while you taste something and it gives you this memory that you're just like, wow. and you just want to keep eating it just because you just want to kind of stay in that place for a little while. She'd be shocked that I'm a truck driver though. She couldn't drive. She really couldn't drive. I remember one time she went to a grocery store and after she loaded everything up, she put the car in drive and it wasn't moving. So she floored it, and then all of a sudden it moved and it bucked really hard as she was going forward. And then she got out of the car and realized that she jumped the concrete barrier in front of her. And then she had to call people in the family to come and get the car off of the concrete barrier. So my mother used to tease me because I became a truck driver after my grandmother died. And my mother would tease me and say, "Well, I hope that you can drive better than your grandmother because she was awful." I'm like, "Yeah, I drive better than her and I can actually navigate unlike you." My mother was in the Air Force and I always teased her that thank God she wasn't trying to like navigating some, some bomb. She wasn't like one of those bomber planes or something because she couldn't find the bank at the end of her street. It's true. My mother was she was so geographically challenged that she worked at the post office for 25 years. And after she retired and hadn't been there for a while, she couldn't find the place again. I needed her to come and bring me something. And me and my brother and my mom, we all worked in the same building. And it had been a few years since she had been there. And she got lost trying to find the place. And I said, "Come on, Mom. Not only did you work here for 25 years, but you got two kids that work here. You can't find the place?" And she said to me, "They moved it." I'm like, "No, Mom. They didn't move the building of 2,000 people that's been here for 40 years. They just changed some of the landmarks that on the roads that got her there." So my mother never knew street names or anything. She did everything by landmark. And my mother and my grandmother, they were funny because I said my mother didn't want to be buried at that cemetery with the Germans. And when my mother would drive me nuts, that's what I would tell her. "Look, you old lady, guess who's going to get to bury you after you die? So you better be nice because I'm going to go put you up in that German cemetery up in Northeast Philly." And she'd say, "No, you're not going to do that. You're not going to do that. Don't you dare." And then I found out that my cousin owned the plots next to my grandmother, directly next to my grandmother. And then I told my mother when she drove me nuts. It was kind of mean because it was like the last time I saw her, too. It was Mother's Day of 2021. And I told her, I said, "Guess what? Cousin Sandy owns those plots next to my grandmother. So guess where you're going? You keep torturing me, old lady. That's where you're going to go." And she said to me, "I was married to your father for 4 years, and I got stuck with his mother for 4 decades. You put me in that plot next to her, and I will wind up torturing you till the day you die." And I said, "Come on, Mom, you're going to torture me even after I'm dead. So what are you talking? You know, I'll be dying my as soon as my soul escapes from my chest and goes up into wherever the heck it's going to go. My mother's going to be sitting there, and she's not going to be sitting there saying, 'Oh, it's so nice to see you. I love you, sweetie.' She's going to say to me, 'What the hell did you do? What the hell did you do? Didn't I tell you? Didn't I raise you better?'" Whatever it is she's seeing me do in my life right now, I know that's how she's going to react. But I will say this, she was proud of me. She was she didn't like me coming out on the road and she didn't understand it. But after a few years and I would mail her postcards from every state in the union, she loved postcards. And she really didn't take care of much. She wasn't the kind of person that was going to collect something. She's a little bit of a pack rat. And after she died and I went home and I cleaned out her apartment, I found all of the postcards. She had like 3 inches of postcards all rubber band together and on top of her TV because that's where she sat every day. She loved watching TV and my mother had a very difficult life. Towards the end of her life, all she wanted to do was just sit home, relax in the quietness, and not be bothered, which was the complete opposite of my grandmother. My grandmother, she wanted to be out partying and dancing. She wanted to dress up. And recently I found a video, the last video I have of my mother and grandmother together, and it's Christmas. And it's funny because they're arguing over a card because what they would do is they would each give each other $100 in a card. And then my mother would take the card and she'd put it back in the old lady's bag. And then the old lady'd realize it and she'd take it and she'd go stick it in my mother's car. And they would fight back and forth. And I got this video of them each saying, "You take it. No, I don't want it. I don't want it either. I don't want it. You old lady, you're driving me nuts. And no, I don't want it. No, you take it." And it's just funny. And, it's okay to miss the people in the past, but it is part of life. And you got to realize that who the heck wants to live forever? Seriously. Yeah. My mother was worried about me with COVID being out on the road. And I used to tell her, "You realize I'm my grandmother's granddaughter, right? Everybody on my father's side of the family, let's say my father didn't die of natural causes. Let's put it that way. Okay. So the people in his side of the family that died of natural causes, they all died in their 90s and they all had dementia and Alzheimer's. So I told my mother a long time ago, I'm going to wind up dying 100 years old and bat crazy. COVID is not getting me. It's just not getting me, Ma. And she used to say, "You don't know that. You don't know that." I'm like, "Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do." Because let's face it, if anything was going to kill me early, it would have been my mother. Been my mother. So every once in a while, when I want a good laugh, I think of my grandmother in her beer halls with her doing the dances, playing the accordion, which, by the way, she bought me an accordion when I was 8 years old. And I used it I think I was like 25. I won Michael Jordan tickets. No lie, I played the accordion on the radio. I'm not going to do it for you guys, though, so don't even think. You guys aren't hearing that. Mm-mm. But I did. I won from a radio station. I won Michael Jordan tickets. It was his last game he played in Philadelphia as a member of the Bulls team. Live life, laugh. When things get you down, realize that it's only temporary. When you start missing the people from the past, realize that you're really lucky to have had those people and those funny moments. I lost my father when I was 3. And so sometimes as I was growing up, when somebody else's parent passed away, I didn't have as much sympathy for them as I probably should have because I was a little selfish. My response, my feelings were, well, at least you got to know your father or your mother. At least you know what their voice sounded like. At least you know what their laugh was, why they laughed, whether they laughed. Were they neat freaks and OCD, or were they clutter bugs or organized chaos, as my mother used to call me? I don't have not one audio or video recording of my father. So today's lesson, boys and girls, is make sure you make those memories. Make sure you etch them in your brain. And even if you don't have videos and audios and that kind of thing from when you were younger, because a lot of us don't have that. This whole digital age came, later in my life. Even if you don't have that, you still have the memories. They're not going to go anywhere. Appreciate what you've had because not everybody's lucky enough to have that. I did actually open up a new website. It's truckerkiersey.com. So I'm going to be posting this podcast and my YouTube videos and all that good stuff over there. Maybe I'll post blog articles again. But anyway, thank you so much for listening. I hope you got a little bit of a chuckle with me tonight. And I hope to see you out there trucking along. Be safe, everybody. Bye.